In this episode of Miss Geek, I present to you Project Urban Suburban, my 1988 Chevy Suburban half-ton four-wheel drive with a 350 and a bunch of car parts in it. So we're going to tackle our first project, a broken seat. So stay tuned. This is the interior of my 88 Suburban. As you can see on the driver's side seat is being held up by a splitting mall handle, which is wedged between the seat and the seat that I put forward, also with a piece of wood right here to spread the load. And that holds it up because the seat frame's broken. And I needed to drive it. So, unfortunately, that wasn't going to last for very long because now I need to be able to drive the vehicle carrying passengers, and so clearly that's not going to work. So the first thing to do to figure out how to repair this is remove the seat. And that's simply 4 bolts, one on each corner. I believe they were 14 millimeter bolts that went into the body. So the next thing is to remove the seat back from the seat base. And so there's 2 bolts here, there's 2 bolts on the other side. So I grabbed my Allen wrench here because I thought these were Allen bolts. They aren't, they're Torx. I didn't have Torx. What I did have is vice grips. You can see his big fat vice grips on the left. Now, everybody has a pair of vice grips, but this pair of vice grips was free. It was found on top of a big log flume in the Sierra Nevadas in California on a hiking excursion several years ago. Doesn't everybody have one of those? Anyway, I have no idea how old these are or anything, but they work, and they were able to pull those bolts off pretty easily. Now, when I put it back together, I used an Allen wrench, or I'm sorry, a Torx wrench, because at the hardware store the very next day I found a Torx set that was on sale in the clearance bin for $7 for I think 8 or 10 different wrenches. So that was really nice. So to get the upholstery off, there's these things called hog rings. And a hog ring is simply a piece of wire that's sharp on each end, bent around 2 pieces of fabric that have a wire going through them. So there's actually a little wire going across here and then across the bottom. They are clamped together with these hog rings. And you can clearly see after getting all those hog rings off, there's the wire here going through this bit, same here. And those hog rings, if you've got a nice pair of diagonal cutters that are sharp and meaty, you can just clip those things right off. As you can see by this one down here, I unbent them with 2 different pairs of pliers, and that was not very easy or fun. Definitely possible, however. So I got that off, and of course I wanted to take the upholstery off. So what I did is I spread it apart and then put the seat up on its edge and inch the left side up. Flip it over onto its left side, inch the right side up, and so on. I got about this far. The reason that I only got this far is because it's bunching up right here. Why on earth? What's stuck right there? Well, I'll tell you. There is a flap. So remember there's this fabric flap here with the metal piece going through it, the metal bar going through it. Well, there's another one, except it's like 3 inches long or 4 inches long, and it goes into the other side of the seat through the foam and attaches to the back side of the seat. And that's what sucks the upholstery in, even though it's on a curve. This is at the center of that curve, and so it pulls the upholstery in so that it's tight up against the seat foam. So what I had to do is get the upholstery up as high as I could and remove those clips, and then it came right off. And you can see there's a slot here in the foam for that bit of upholstery. Unfortunately, it is a giant hot mess, and so you can see there's a fairly clean break here, but this is really kinked. The spring has gotten into the foam pretty badly. I put it back the way it's supposed to be, and you can see this is kinked super bad right here. So it's going to have to come apart. There's another video on YouTube that shows the fella who was able to use some wet towels and put them over the foam and welded it together right without removing it from the foam. This is too severe in this case. That's not going to work. So I started pulling it apart. And when I pulled it apart, you can see more clearly now the problem. This is the right side of the seat frame, and this is the left side. And the foam came off, of course, on the pipe itself, or on the tubing. So I spent some time with my wire wheel brush in a drill and got that cleaned up. So I drove the truck up to my friend's house, and my friend Kevin here, he's got a shop with some welding tools and metalworking tools. He opened up the frame, or sorry, the tubing with a smaller piece, and is using this giant metal awl and beating the tubing around it to return it to something resembling a round shape. The other side needed a little bit more persuasion, and so out comes the propane torch and putting it in his vise and clamping it down into a shape here. And this is something resembling round, and the way he got it that way and so cleanly was by using a punch and a hammer to punch back here, not on the edge, but behind it. And the reason is you can see this edge is extremely thin, and so you can't really weld to that, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the other side was also really thin, and so what he did is he had to remove some material. What's interesting is that when he tried to put the ends together before removing material, the frame was too long. It was elongated on this side only, and so the whole thing was cockeyed. And so he had to measure how much material to take off of each side in order to return the frame to its proper length so that it could be welded. And so he beveled this edge here, and of course the opposite edge, so that he could get some penetration in the weld. Did the same thing on this side, and there he is welding it together. And this is the let's see, I believe this is the kinked side here, and no, I take it back. This is the kinked side over here. This is the right side, and this is the butted side, the side that has clean break. So this is the clean break side. He was simply able to weld that back together and add some material for strength. The kinked and broken side, same thing, added lots of material for strength because, of course, the heating makes it lose some of its tensile strength. So he had to add lots of metal to it. Of course, here's the completed repair, and it looks really good. It's the right shape. All the bends are in the right places. There is a very, very slight bend back here, and so he was able to preserve that on both sides, which is really cool. The problem is the foam isn't ready. The foam itself took some severe abuse because the seat was broken for so long. And right along that edge on the right side there, right here, you can see that that's broken, and this piece, if it had broken up here, that piece would have just come out altogether, which would have not been a lot of fun to fix. So you can see it got into the springs got into the foam, and the foam's broken and cracked pretty severely. So Gorilla Glue to the rescue, wetted all those areas with water, poured off the excess water, and then glued it, and of course you have to clamp it. To clamp it, I used duct tape. And duct tape, when it came off, did bring a little bit of foam with it, but if you're careful, it doesn't chunk. It just pulls a very slight layer, and it does not affect the operation of the foam. So you can see the duct tape there, and you can see right here in the middle, that big yellowish white section is the Gorilla Glue. And Gorilla Glue is cool because it's moisture activated, and it doesn't just adhere, it expands. And so it's great for foam because of that. It's great for a lot of repairs, really. I really like the stuff. But it expands, and you can actually even sand it and you know, I don't know if you want to fill it, but you can sand it down and make it part of a piece so that the repair is less noticeable. So I wetted the entire channel here, poured a ton of Gorilla Glue into it, and put the frame in to glue the seat foam back to the frame. And you can see I'm using some soda cans to support it here, 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 and here. That way, the seat is basically clamping itself to the foam just via gravity. And this spacer, this is the attachment to the base here. This spacer had fallen off. It was spot welded and those broke. I'm not really sure why. And so my friend welded that back for me. And of course, here's my savior, Gorilla Glue, my hero of the day. It was up to here when I started. I used about 40% of it, but again, money well spent. And I put the springs back with some duct tape underneath them to help spread the load so they wouldn't dig back into the foam. I had Gorilla Glued a lot of the foam, but still, I needed more. I wish I had some more duct tape. I actually ran out. I would have put several more layers. And I thought about raiding some of my wife's craft stuff, maybe getting some denim to put in here, but I didn't want it to mold in the future, possibly, just in case. Wasn't quite sure about that, so I just used duct tape. So here, like the old Chilton manual says, installation is the opposite of removal, right? Not quite. So we've got to get this back together, and you'll see there's some zip ties here. That bar that goes across the back was a real pain in the neck. And in the middle, there's fabric covering the bar, but on the edges, there's not. And the bar is just bare. And so I zip tied it to the seat frame. And then in the middle, I just kind of got a hog clip on there and tightened it as best I could. I keep saying hog clip. They are hog rings. And these hog rings are not hard to use, but you do need a special tool to be able to get in there, and I don't have it. So, because I'm not a professional upholstery guy. So here's what the hog ring pliers look like. And you can see I've already got a hog ring here. So the way these go on is pretty simple. First, you pinch the edges together. Remember, there's a metal bar going through each edge. You apply the metal hog ring and squeeze. Squeeze some more. Squeeze more. Voila. And there's the whole seat. And you'll see that this piping here was supposed to go under the hog rings, and I forgot to do that, so I added a couple extra rings to hold that down. And there's the completed seat repair. You'll notice I did not really talk about these armrests too much. There's one bolt holding them in. This upholstery just peels off. It's like a sock, basically. And it is a tight fit, of course, but it just goes on and off like a sock, so you don't really have to worry about that. I wiggled the armrests up and down to try to give myself some room to get the covers on and off, so that was not that difficult. And of course, the very next step, install it in the truck. But wait, why is the passenger seat in the driver's side and the driver's seat in the passenger side? Well, I told you I drove the truck up to my friend's house, right? That's how. Old trucks rock because everything's pretty much symmetrical. In many newer vehicles, the seat mounts are not symmetrical, and so you couldn't do this. But of course, this was engineered in 1970 or 1971 probably, because this model came out in 1973. So this is the old style engineering, built like a tank and easy to work on too. And so the reason I did this was, so, of course, so I could drive the vehicle. But after I did it, I realized, hey, this is really good because this worn side right here, which of course was over here originally, will no longer get use and be worn more. The other thing too is that when you press on the gas pedal and the brake pedal, you're putting pressure against the seat back generally. And so by using the original passenger seat, which saw very likely very little use, I saved the old seat for a passenger that will put less pressure on it, I hope. So the seat should last a long time with its repair. Oops. And of course, the nice thing too is that both the outsides of both seats will see less the brunt of the use now, instead of this torn up side getting more and more torn up over the next several years. So that's it. I hope this has been really helpful to you. And by the way, before, after. And yes, I took those awful seat covers off. They've probably been on there a very long time. Surely they did protect the upholstery, but they also looked just terrible. and they were well past their point of usefulness. They didn't stick to the seats at all, and so it was time for them to go. And I may get new ones in the future, but it's not a high priority right now. So there's other projects coming. I've got to tear into the steering column. I've got to tear into the doors for some lock and window issues, and more. I've also got some serious cleaning to do, as you can see. So stay tuned to the channel, and make sure you subscribe down below. And also look at the description. There'll be a link to my website where you'll see what tools I used, and maybe some other pictures if I can find any. And just a short description of what was done here. So I hope this has been useful to you. Like I said, make sure you subscribe. If you go to the blog, make sure you subscribe there too, in the top right corner of the blog. And down here on YouTube, right next to subscribe is the little bell. Make sure you click the bell so you get notifications of new posts. So I hope the video has been helpful for you, and have a great day.